guys, I'm Charlie, a Charlie Book Fanatic. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to do a spoiler-free review of A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. So today I'm going to do a spoiler-free review, and tomorrow I'm going to do a discussion of this book because I have read it and I have loved it and I want to share my opinions with you. I haven't done a review of A Court of Thorns and Roses, which is the first book in the series. And I'm not sure I'm going to do one because I don't have a lot of opinions on it. I just wasn't the biggest fan of it. I just read the second book and I fell in love with it. And I don't know how it happened, but Sarah J. Maas made me fall in love with this series. So if you have not read the first book in the series, A Court of Thorns and Roses, please go away because there probably will be spoilers for the first book. What my opinion was of the first book, I despised Tamlin in the first book. That was my problem with it. And the second book just solidified why I hated Tamlin. We also met Rhys, the other love interest in the first book, and I immediately liked him, but I felt like we got to see not a lot of him, so I didn't have an opinion on him yet. I wasn't enamored with any of the characters really. But in the second book, Feyre, the female main character, has grown so much. After the first book, I felt like the first book ended with a happy ever after. Like, it was all good, and then you start the first book and Feyre has PTSD, Tamlin has PTSD, everyone has PTSD and nightmares and thrashing in the night. We have a happily ever after at the end of the first book, and then everything goes to shit in the second book. I wasn't the biggest fan of that. So it started kind of roughly for me, but Feyre has grown to be such a badass woman and character in general. She really came into her Fae powers, like her high Fae powers, and I admired her so much for it because I felt she was kind of a doormat in the first book, and we got to see a whole lot of banter with Rhys and just a lot of Rhys in general, and the more we got to see of him, the more I fell in love with him. They're like my ultimate ship right now. I love them. I also read a review where someone said that Tamlin was the good guy in the first book and then became the bad guy in the second book. They basically changed roles because Rhys was supposed to be the bad guy in the first book and became the good guy in the second book. But I do not agree with that because I don't feel like Tamlin was portrayed as the good guy in the first book. At least I don't think he was, because I really disliked him. And I liked Rhys, even though he was supposed to be the bad guy. And then Rhys became the good guy and I loved him even more. You know what I mean? I don't know. I just feel like Rhys is a more developed character. He's not as possessive over Feyre as Tamlin is. Tamlin obviously suffers from PTSD after what happened to him under the mountain, but I didn't think he handled it really well. Like, he went a bit crazy. Having said that, Rhys has been under the mountain for 50 years, so he obviously has some PTSD there as well, but he handled it much better. He accepted Feyre for what she is, a woman in her own right, an independent person, and Tamlin didn't do that. Tamlin saw Feyre as his possession, as his object, as his reward for having survived under the mountain. I did like how Feyre's PTSD was handled. She has nightmares, she never forgets what she did under the mountain. She killed all those Fae to save Tamlin, and she walks around with that very much so, and it keeps coming back up to the surface, and I felt like that was very realistic. She didn't forget what she did, she never did, and she handled herself well despite all of it. We also get introduced to a lot of side characters in the second book that we haven't seen before. We get introduced to Rhys's inner court, that consists of two females who are Mor, who is Rhys' cousin. We're introduced to Emran, who is a friend of Rhys, and to warriors, Azriel and Cassian, and those are Reese's inner court, and I really liked all of them. I liked how all of their personalities got developed, but there's also so much more room to explore the history that all of these characters have with each other, because we got some snippets of it, but we didn't get to see a whole lot of their history, because they're obviously all a lot older than Feyre is, and Feyre hasn't been always with them, so she only got to know what these characters told her, but we don't know everything because they have known each other for years and years and years. But I feel like Rhys was respectful towards anyone. He handled his friends really well. We got to see a side of him that we haven't seen before. I loved its book because of its characters, not necessarily for its plot, because I feel its plot was lacking a little bit. It almost feels like a middle grade kind of plot. Feyre goes to live with Rhys. They are looking for this magical book and cauldron that's going to save them from the looming war. And I felt like, what are we looking for? We're looking for a magical book to save the world. I wasn't totally convinced of that, but I gave this book 5 stars because of its characters. The characters were amazing. They were all fleshed out and realized, and I love the book for it, and I am really excited to see how this goes forward, because this series has a lot of books in it. It's going to have 6 books and 2 novellas, I believe. It was supposed to be a trilogy, so I am wondering what's going to happen in the next 4 books, and I am really excited after this one. So let me know down below, what was A Court of Mist and Fury's strongest point for you if you have read, and if you have only read A Court of Thorns and Roses. Are you going to read A Court of Mist and Fury? What did you think of the first book? Does the second book appeal to you? Doesn't it? Let me know all of your thoughts down below. I would love to know. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.